Now I have a couple of steering wheels that I can use, and I've just been looking through the collection to see which is the one with, or for a start, which is the one actually has the better chrome in the pieces here, and which one has the, I guess, the best non-damage finish. Now I picked this one. I haven't found any major problems. The paint, I assume it was paint on it originally, is coming off in places and worn through in other places. So what I'll have to do is to actually rub it back, and I'll do that with wet, probably starting with 400, and see how that goes. If I need to go more coarse than that, I will. And I'll try and get this back to, which appears to be metal, sounds like metal, and get it back to bare metal. The seeing this really wasn't permanently attached to the car, the components that make up the steering wheel, I mean, this is something to do with the horn, so I've got to clean all that out. I'll actually have to, I tried to put it on the spline of the steering column and it wouldn't fit. I assume the reason for that is that this actually clamps on to the steering column on the spline, and maybe it's just pushed in too far, so I'll probably try and spread that very carefully just to make it easier to slide on and off, and I'll clean up the splines. So the object with this is to clean the chrome, rub this back, see if there's any damage. If there's not, then proceed to putting another epoxy enamel on the steering wheel. So that's the plan for that. At the same time, I'll be looking at the Trafficator horn switch. Now I do have a couple of those in these containers. Some are more complete than others. They're very weathered, so I've got to go through those and find out which ones I will use, which ones are damaged, and as I do with everything else, I'll pull them apart, check the condition internally. The wiring, I'll probably replace that wiring and make up a new loom, and I've got to go through, and this piece here actually holds the horn button in place. We've got a few of those. Some are quite corroded, once again, probably salt air. I'll see if I've got any that are serviceable. This one seems to be the best, but I'll actually have to clean it up a bit more. So the plan with this is to go through, look at the bits and pieces that I'll use. That one obviously I can't, it's cracked. This one here looks like it's in pretty good condition. So I've got to go through the pieces, and I'll assemble one good Trafficator out of the components I've got. So when I've done the wheel, I'll make sure that the Trafficator fits into the housing and everything is okay. So this will be completed as one process. The horn button and Trafficator mechanism fits in the middle of the steering wheel. Now I have two here. Not sure whether it's off the car or not, whether either of them are off the car. I assume one of them would be. What I'm going to do is to use the best bits of the two and then put them together as a new unit. One's got a slight chip in the outside surround. The soldering iron's still hot. The Trafficator on this one is quite weathered. This one is a little bit better. So, and also this housing is a little bit better than the other one. So what I'm going to do, as I say, is to mix and match. The internal bits, I'll make sure that I get the one with the least wear, and I'll reassemble. Once again, I've drawn up a diagram of how everything fits together, where the wiring goes, and what I'll be doing initially is to clean everything up, repolish these, in which case it's probably this one, repolish these and select the best horn button. Not too sure which one that will be, but I'll see how they polish up, and then go about reassembling. Reassembling hopefully will go a little bit easy, or a little bit easier than it came apart. What happened in one of them, all the nuts were soldered, and on the other unit they weren't soldered. Getting the solder off is a real pain, and then trying to undo the nuts. So I'll have to decide whether I put a little dab of solder on them when I'm finished. Not sure whether I will, or even whether it's necessary, but at this stage I need to get the best pieces and then clean them up and then look at reassembly. I'll strip the Trafficator apart, and purpose is obviously to clean up the contacts and so on. Also to make sure all the pieces were working properly. I found that this, or the main housing, wasn't lubricated properly, so this was actually hardly moving at all, which would have caused a problem in terms of having the Trafficator work properly in terms of cutting out when the wheel is turned. So, important to pull things apart. That's now been freed up and lubricated. That's okay. Contacts have been cleaned. In fact, I've pulled the individual contacts out of the unit. They go back inside there. I'll put those in a minute. The various moving parts have been lubricated. This has been polished up. As you see, the contacts have all been cleaned inside. The horn component of it is here because it's a combined horn and Trafficator switch. The plastic components, I'll just polish those up. They're okay. They'll all go back together fine. I'll just clean this brass contact up in a minute. So, not all that complicated. It does have a lot of small parts which you need to put back together. A lot of brass parts, so I'll reassemble that and then fit it to the steering wheel. I was going to replace the wiring. The wiring looks okay. It'll be fine, so I'll drop that back in and tested it obviously before I put it back onto the steering wheel, but at this stage it's looking quite serviceable. I've had to swap some parts over from another unit I had, so once again these things can be repaired. So an advantage of older vehicles. Just finished the Trafficator switch. A little bit fiddly getting the nuts on, but pointed nose pliers helps with that. Follow the sequence on the diagram I made when I pulled it apart. It works alright at this stage. Left and right indicators, the horn button works. The main thing I need to check now is when I put the housing back on and put it back in the steering wheel to see whether in fact it will cancel out. Now I'm hoping that that part of the Trafficator is working properly. I've cleaned everything up. It should activate properly, but anyway, I'll see when I put it back into the steering wheel. restoring steering wheels is not something I've attempted before. This wheel here is in pretty good condition. It doesn't have any cracks. The problem with it is it's very faded. Now I've rubbed that back with 600 wet just to clean off any grime and dirt, which I've done. What the wheel was made out of, what this is, I'm not thoroughly sure, but I suspect it's some form of plastic. That being the case, I have to be careful when I spray, and I am going to spray an enamel over the top of that, a black enamel. Now, I've sprayed plastic before, and you have to use a different form of primer, which I've just got a pressure pack full of primer. I'll put a coating of that on, then I'll rub this back again, probably up to 1,000 to make it nice and smooth. Now I don't know how smooth this is. I mean, it's smooth to the touch, but when you put gloss on, it will show imperfections. So at this stage I have some primer sealer, which I'll put on to go over this suspected plastic, rub it back, and then put a coat of epoxy on. So I'll show you basically the finished article. The steering wheel has been completed. I sprayed it up, gave it a better gloss look, was very faded, polished up the plastic on the Trafficator, built the Trafficator. I've now installed that. It does actually cancel out when you turn the wheel, so it's working well. The contacts in the Trafficator are now working properly. The horn button works properly, and final adjustment will be when it's put in the car, of course. And there's adjustments on the bottom here to be able to, you loosen that off, centralise your wheel, and then set the Trafficator, so you're able to position that so the Trafficators are working properly. So that's now working well, and I'll store that away ready to put on the car when I'm finished.